talking to Mr. Herbie Hancock. Before I ask you something about the Magnificent New Standard tour and album, I have one question. I was imagining I'm an alien surfing into the Earth for the first time, and the first person I meet is Mr. Hancock, and he tells me he plays the piano, and I ask him, "What's that?"
So what would my response be? I would say it's an instrument or a device that makes sound, and the sound affects the human spirit in a way that's different than the voice. Because obviously you'd have to have a voice if you're an alien speaking to me, you know? And there's a lot of power to sound. You know? That's why the voice is so important, for example, in popular music. You know? Because people can really identify with the sound of the human voice. Because every person has that, you know, unless, you know, the few that don't, you know. But the piano has a different color to it than the human voice, and it's a mechanical device, but it's one that you can manipulate with your fingers, and you can, if you care about living things, you have the opportunity to relate to them in this very special way, and perhaps, you know, affect their lives in a very positive way through the sound of this thing called music.
So it's a device with feeling.
The device has no feeling. A piano has no feeling. The human being has to have the feeling. You have to learn how to translate that feeling into the parts of your body that you need in order to manipulate this device. In my case, I have to learn how to translate my fingers into something that can manipulate this device, but in a way that, I mean, the goal is to become so fused with the device when you play it that it doesn't sound like the device itself. It sounds more like the life of the person that's playing it, you know. And I was just thinking about Wayne Shorter, for example, on the saxophone. You know, when he plays the saxophone, it's not like hearing the saxophone. It's like hearing Wayne, you know. So that becomes his voice. So in my case, the piano is my voice.
And with that voice, you have made a very interesting step. You have approached pop songs, if I might call them that way. Mm-hmm. You have said these are new standards, and you have treated them. Tell us something about that idea.
Well, I'm not saying that these songs or these writers are the writers of the new standards. Actually, in a sense, the title of my CD is more like a question. The question is, I think it's time for us to kind of break this fixed kind of concept of standards, because up to this point there have been songs by people like Cole Porter and, you know, George Gershwin and you know, Oscar Hammerstein and many really great writers from the 30s and from the 40s. And many of those tunes, I mean, they were standards. They were like the pop tunes of their time. Also, they happened to be the jazz tunes of their time, because at that time, popular music was called jazz. You know, later on, I don't know when the word pop music became separated from jazz, but it happened because I think jazz began to concentrate more on its instrumental, primarily instrumental values and artistic values, and for many musicians and for many areas of jazz, they began to concentrate more on the virtuosity also of the musicians. Not that you have to use a virtuoso technique, you know, no more than the music of Chopin, for example, doesn't have to be played furiously and fast, you know, and show off your technique. It's not that. It can be played very beautifully and very carefully. But to have the technique and the virtuosity available to you, it gives you that much more of a palette to be able to express yourself.
How did you pick and choose these particular titles? Were they just tunes that you already knew and that you enjoyed?
First I thought about the composers, and for some of the people that I picked, I thought of them first, and then I began to look for the composition that would best fit the album. It doesn't apply to everybody in the same way, you know. For example, Sade, I wasn't thinking so much of Sade as a great writer of standards so much. Not that she couldn't be, you know, but I was just thinking about her popularity and the way those tunes are constructed. They can leave a lot of room for various interpretations. In the case of Kurt Cobain, for example, he's not my favorite writer, you know, but in his case, I was just thinking it would be interesting to take a writer that the public would say, there's no way to turn this into a jazz tune. Yeah. There's no way that Herbie Hancock could do this kind of a tune. You know, and I wanted to take something that was someone that was more extreme to how people would conceive my choices. And
obviously, people who are Nirvana fans are going to be introduced to jazz now.
That's fine with me.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hancock.
Well, I was introduced to Nirvana, so it's okay.
Thanks.